Okay, so this is from Darren in Australia. Hi Darren. What martial and cultural elements of Koru do you feel would best benefit a modern world, especially in this information and digital age?
Okay, well, my two sons call me a dinosaur when it comes to IT, but I do see the value of it, and I can see that for long-term distance learning, IT can be of a great value, as long as it doesn't water down the Koru or the Kobudo that one is following. And I suppose there could be a danger in that, but not necessarily. My mind is open to it. So as far as the cultural, they say Kobudo can only be taught from a master to a student by oral tradition, and that is true, but this can be passed through IT technology today. So, we are talking now, it could be one-to-one as we're speaking. I think with Kobudo, there are certain techniques that do not represent the modern world in self-defense situations, and there are certain techniques that do. And I think that if you're looking at a Kobudo and taking Kobudo techniques for modern self-defense, it is possible. I think it's very possible. I think from my experience, one of the problems that a martial artist has is having too many techniques. And when presented with shall we say, an altercation or a street situation, these overload of techniques can actually be a problem. I think from a Koru, I can think of say 4 or 5 Tenjin Shinyo techniques that I can pick out of the 124 kata forms and practice on the bob, which would perhaps get me out of most scrapes. But these have to be practiced, of course. Keiko, train, Keiko, Keiko. Keiko, as Kubota Sensei would say to me, train, train, train. And I think that when you train in certain limited number of techniques and become a true master of those techniques, they become a very valuable tool in modern self-defense situations. And I learnt that principle many years ago from, I can't think of his name now, but he's in the Combat Association with Jeff Thompson. Peter Constantine. He was a Shukokai, if I'm correct, Shukokai practitioner, which incidentally, I was one of the first people to train in the 8 or 9 combinations of Shukokai karate, taught by Tani Chojiro, and was brought actually into this country, the first seminar ever, by Kimura Shigeru and Nambu Noshinao at the time. And to this day I practice some of those techniques and some of the principles behind, for example, the double hip twist, which incidentally in the Tenjin Shinyo kata also have that form, and generates quite a lot of shock, impact and power when you strike. Yeah, so I don't see a problem in a Koru becoming part of this modern world.
culturally though, from say the Western mind or young mind really, what do you feel would be the benefits of youngsters in training?
For me, the biggest benefit that not just youngsters but any person is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a certain lack of discipline in the world today,
Mm-hmm.
a lack of what can I say, a lack of respect for human life. You know
Mm-hmm.
where we live every day. There's a knifing on the street. You know, there's murders in the next street to where we live. It's becoming, a district where you don't want to go out at night because there's drug running and all sorts. And so for me, there's a lack of morality and discipline. And I think a kabudo, or any martial art, comes to that. If it's taught correctly, with heart and mind, kokoro, heart and mind, and taught correctly, then I think it gives a certain discipline and morality, and that's, I think, the most important thing. In kabudo, people say, well, why do we have to start on basics and then take 10 years to learn the advanced techniques? And my answer is really what I've just given, because one has to mould the character. One has to have a discipline, a morality, not just go out and strike and pick a fight and hit and kill people, or try to kill people. That to me is not the correct way. In Aikido they teach harmony. Tenjin Shinyo is different to that. I look upon it as the more one advances, then the more deadly the techniques one learns, because the Gokui techniques you can't deny are more deadly than, say, the Shodan techniques. And when taught correctly, the Kyusho points, the vital points, and the theory behind that, and you're only really taught that at Menkyo Kaiden level, then one by then has the trust of the Rugi in general, and the character and spirit of a true martial artist. And that's what I feel I'd like to look upon my grandchildren who practice martial arts, Lee's children, Oliver, Emil, Amelia, and my little other grandson from Anthony. I would not like them to be trained to be monsters, to go out there and be bullies and so forth. Training is a discipline, it's a morale, and this is what has been taught right from the beginning by Aruso Izomatemon. If you read the Tairoku, the great large record, then you will understand that these are the virtues that he was portraying. So that's my answer to that.
I'd like to add on to that a little bit, if you don't mind. So from my experience, what you were saying about the Gokuri techniques, there is an element of when you're doing the Gokuri techniques against like the Shinken, then you are facing the potential of your life being taken, although it is actually choreographed with kata, but there is still error of mistake.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you get a downward cut, you could end up like Van Gogh with no ear. But also the fact that those techniques are represented in the Tennomaki, so Heaven's Scroll, and the teachings within that, it sort of equalizes the violence with the spiritual teachings.
I didn't actually finish.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I kind of went off track a bit, and I was saying about Aikido teaches love and harmony, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying anything else about that. But Tenjin Shinyo is different to that. It is a killing art. They use terms like satsu, to kill, but I think the more you train and the more you understand the principles, the techniques, the more you realize how dangerous they are, and the more you realize that they are not to be used just, just because someone calls you a silly twit or whatever. They are to be used only in a life and death situation. Now that might sound corny, but I believe that.
Shike.
I would be scared to hit somebody with full power. My students say to me, Shike, I'm scared. I'm scared when you demonstrate a strike. And strangely enough, when I've seen martial artists, a lot of martial artists, they don't know how to strike correctly. This sounds a ridiculous thing to say, but that's how I view it. And one of my students, he'd just recently come back from Okinawa, and he'd been in the dojo of, I forget the name he said, but he's renowned for King of the Zuki, the thrust punch. And he said, Shike, your thrust punch is just as scary, if not scarier than his, which surprised me a little bit. But the truth of the matter is, if you develop a lot of power, and you realize that, and you realize the damage that can be done to the human body, then it does make you respect the martial art you're practicing and make you respect human life.
So actually, that actually covers another question that was asked by Richard of the UK.
Oh yeah.
And that was that, if I can find it. Where is he? About teaching old and new self-defense, about the considerations that you should be given teaching potentially lethal traditional techniques and putting them in the body injury, in the body's memory,
Muscle memory.
Muscle memory. So really that covers that as well, doesn't it? Because you're...
Yeah, the longer you train, and the training, if done systematically, gradual, systematically, progressively of course, over a period of time, I think is important. I don't like these videos and these DVDs and the things that come out on YouTube and they teach these so-called deadly strikes. Anybody could be watching that, and this is why in my early days the British Karate Control Commission was set up, because a guy self-trained, was influenced by various things, topics, articles, books, martial arts, and he read, and he went out and killed someone, and it nearly got karate and martial arts like this banned in this country. But the British Karate Control Commission from that was set up to control. So I think it's very important that this is why in Kobudo Rugi there has to be a trust in the monjin, in the student person. And many Kobudo masters would take it very seriously if one of their students goes out and kills a person.
It reflects on them, doesn't it?
Their belief is that it reflects on them, and that great harm will come to them through the gods.
Yeah.
And that sounds esoteric, but it's a good esoteric moral, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.